Here are some things that have happened. Gas prices down. Economic indicators are decent. Brand new jobs report shows that's much better than expected. And border crossings are down. And now Trump's mega spending bill looks like it's going to be passed by Republicans. How do you Democrats fight back with the wins that Trump can tout?
Well, it depends on how you define win, Sarah. I mean, the way I can summarize this big, ugly bill best is Republicans caved, Trump lied, and people will die.
Meanwhile,
a deportation machine that will be unleashed on steroids by this one big, ugly bill.
Of Hakeem Jeffries at the podium for more than an hour trying to discredit this bill right now?
Well, Maria, I'm not going to take firefighting advice from an arsonist. The Democrats had the majorities. They blew out the budget. They had the tons of wasteful spending, and we inherited a mess. And under President Trump's leadership, along with Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, we are going to get the economy humming again via the private sector. This is a Main Street Working America bill. It is going to address the affordability crisis. We are going to increase working people's wages. And, you know, the Democratic Party at present doesn't stand for anything. They're just against everything. And let's see where the economy is this time next year. Yeah. I think this bill, over the next year, we are going to see growth like we have not seen. And importantly, it is going to be non-inflationary growth, which is something the Democrats couldn't do.
On this vote, the yeas are 218, the nays are 214. The motion is adopted. Without objection, the motion.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to talk about Democrats who are fuming over the fact that President Trump's big, beautiful bill has officially passed the House after the Senate version was passed. Now the House has passed it. Now it's going to the president's desk. They're going to have a signing ceremony tomorrow on July 4th on Independence Day, which I think is appropriate, right? And this is the defining piece of legislation for President Trump's second term. I think that his whole legacy is riding on this bill being successful. And I personally believe that people should give it a chance, right? I personally think that the bill is not perfect, right? But that doesn't mean that there are not good things in the bill and that there are not middle-class wins in the bill, because there certainly are middle-class wins, okay? But if you listen to Democrats, you would believe that it's the end of the world, that you're going to die, right? Millions of people are going to die because of this bill, which is what Hakeem Jeffries, a.k.a. Timo Obama, a.k.a. Discount Obama, okay, a.k.a. No Swag Obama, tried to push on the House floor as he spoke for hours and hours and hours. I believe the dude spoke for 6 to 8 hours on the House floor, putting people to sleep, talking about how, again, the bill is going to kill people, but also at the same time saying some things that I think may have made some GOP congressmen, at least according to J.D. Vance, who are on the fence, actually vote yes on the bill. Because according to Hakeem Jeffries, this is going to put President Trump's mass deportation agenda on steroids, which, again, in my opinion, is a very positive thing.
All-out assault on the care, Mr. Speaker, being provided by Planned Parenthood, the medical care being provided by Planned Parenthood. Speaker, that's not what this country should be all about. Manu wasn't the only one. The only American citizen who's been targeted by the deportation machine, a deportation machine that will be unleashed on steroids by this one big ugly bill. We know that, in fact, is the case. That's not hyperbole.
I thank the gentleman from Missouri. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Ronald Reagan said one time that no speech should be longer than 20 minutes, and unlike the Democrat leader, I'm going to honor my colleague's time and be a little more brief than that, all right? I just want to say something that many of us learned when we were children. We were taught, you know, it takes a lot longer to build a lie than to tell the simple truth. My friends and colleagues on both sides of the aisle, we've waited long enough. Some of us have literally been up for days now. But this day is a hugely important one in the history of our nation. We have a big job to finish.
Yeah, so Hakeem Jeffries' soliloquy, again, seems to have backfired because, again, J.D. Vance put this out here. Again, I'm not sure it's a joke. I'm not sure if this is real or what, but, you know, I can imagine that, you know, a good Republican hearing that this bill is going to put President Trump's mass deportation agenda on steroids should probably vote for the bill, right? If you're on the fence. JD says, a GOP congressman just texted me, quote, I was undecided on the bill, but then I watched Hakeem Jeffries' performance, and now I'm a firm yes. Hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think Democrats are convincing anybody except the liberals who like to be fearmongered too about what's in the bill.
People are going to have their SNAP and WIC cut back. People are going to go hungry. People are going to get sick on a scale unlike anything we've ever seen. And all of it is just to finance tax cuts for billionaires and the wealthiest corporations who don't even need it. I don't think I've ever seen, I don't think we have ever seen or are prepared for how catastrophic this is set to be for a lot of people. And I think it's devastating. And they're talking about this as though it's some tax cut. Even the stuff that they're talking about, taxes on tips, no tax on tips, that's only for people, that's only up to $25,000. And if you're making less than that, you're already kind of exempt from a lot of these things in the first place. So they're giving people crumbs and they're taking away the whole loaf. And it's just a genuinely really sad day for our country.
What about Leader Jeffries' final message, looking ahead to 2026, 2028?
But ultimately, Democrats are just lying, right? They're lying. They're pretending as if all of the tax benefits go to the so-called rich, which, by the way, having tax benefits for corporations and for businesses is not a bad thing. That actually benefits working class people because it creates jobs and opportunities, okay? There are people who are entrepreneurs and there are people who are workers, okay? That's just the reality of how our economy and capitalism works. Everybody can't be an entrepreneur. Everybody can't be a worker. Entrepreneurs create jobs for workers, and ultimately, workers and entrepreneurs are going to win, right, when it comes to this bill.
Let's talk about the big, beautiful bill, because unfortunately for the left, it hasn't sunk in for them yet that you don't make the poor rich by making the rich poorer, although they are trying their darndest and bankrupting all of us in the process. You see, they would have you believe that just because something is helpful for upper-class Americans, it must inherently be harmful for lower and middle-class Americans, but that couldn't be further from the truth, and I'm going to actually substantiate that to you rather than just fear-mongering. For example, one of the main goals of this bill is to make permanent the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was a major win for lower and middle-class Americans who saw their household incomes rise by $5,000 as well as their wages increase by 5%. On top of that, we're going to be seeing taxes removed from tips for service workers who usually fall into those categories. Obviously, they are going to be depositing that money back into the economy, which is going to help to be boosting it. We're also going to be seeing a $10,000 tax deduction for people who buy American-made automobiles. Obviously, that's going to be very helpful for people buying the vehicle on top of the automobile industry as a whole, which the Democrats bankrupted by overtaxing that industry until they decided to go overseas where it was cheaper. Trump is also working on bringing fossil fuels back to America, where we are going to be seeing American providers. Unlike Biden, who actually bankrupted the Keystone Pipeline, pulled funding, and then told those middle working class Americans that if they wanted a job, they should probably go learn how to code. But yeah, tell me again how it's the right that's hurting the working class? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. On top of that, we're also going to be seeing a tax credit for both children and for the elderly. Many people on the left are trying to fearmonger and say that he's pulling benefits from those who need it the most. No, he's not. If you actually read the bill, you see the benefits are being slashed from people who don't need it, but instead have been leeching off of our government. For example, with SNAP, it's specifically going after able-bodied Americans who have no dependents. So people who are choosing not to work. We have plenty of open jobs. They are choosing not to take those positions so that they could just live off of the government, live off of the taxpayer dollars, and that is going to be stopping and saving us plenty of money. He's not taking it away from Americans who actually need it. People are also trying to say that he's going after important benefits such as Medicaid, but if you look at where the Medicaid is being pulled from, it's being pulled from Planned Parenthood. That is something that should have been stopped funding a long time ago. All they do is take the lives of innocent children, and that is where they are making the majority of their profits. That is not where American taxpayer dollars should be going, and in fact, it's actually being rerouted to places like rural hospitals, as well as medical clinics on a state level. That is where that money should be going, and should have always been going from the very, very start of things. Many people are trying to say that because this bill is expensive, it's going to be bankrupting us, but that's not what the Council of Economic Advisors say. They actually say that the GDP is expected to grow by 4.2%, and we are going to see investments rise by 19%. So sure, this bill is going to be helpful to the wealthy, the wealthy who invest in people's businesses, who create jobs for Americans, who do all of these wonderful things, who invest their own money and take their own risks in order to advance the United States as a whole, but it's also going to bring up the lower and middle class because you don't have to bring anybody down to make America great again. It's not just going to be lining the pockets of Wall Street, it's also going to be putting gas in your car and food on your table.
Any questions? Any questions? Okay, I hope people understand how this works, right? How supply siders should think, right, when it comes to this stuff, okay? Yes, when you talk about tax cuts, whether it be for the middle class or for the so-called rich, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad, right? Having people get up and go to work instead of living off the government is not bad, okay? Incentivizing businesses to invest, to build factories here in America, to create jobs is not bad, right? It's not bad for the middle class. It's good for the middle class. And we saw how Democrats said some of the same things about President Trump's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was also a supply-side stimulus. And I think most people agree that that piece of legislation was a success, right? That was one of the reasons why President Trump's economy in his first term was booming, right? Especially going into the pandemic, okay? We were booming, okay? Because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So Democrats just have a bad track record when it comes to their judgment of President Trump's policies and his agenda. So I just would not trust the people who've literally been wrong about everything, okay? I would not trust them when it comes to their opinions on this piece of legislation. It's almost as if Democrats don't stand for a damn thing, so they have to be against everything, and they have to just lie and exaggerate about what the bill is going to do in order to get votes, because they don't have a bill. They have no answer. They have 4 years to accomplish something when it comes to making the economy better for everybody, but actually they just made it better for the rich, right? That's the irony here. The rich benefited the most under Democrats, right? So now all of a sudden they want to turn around and talk about handouts for the rich, tax cuts for the rich, when Democrats have been the party of the rich for the last 45 years, right? I'm just saying, the inflation that happened as a result of the policies of the Democrats, okay, primarily benefited the rich, and it primarily hurt the working class. So again, I want to hear anything from these people whose policies have been a complete and total disaster for the people that they claim they're trying to help. So, hey, I'm totally fine with trying something different, right? I'm totally fine with, some tax cuts, right? Some deregulation, okay? Closing the border, getting illegals out of the country. Yeah, I think doing the opposite of what Democrats did might be a good idea, right? Don't you think? Okay, I mean, it's just common sense. But, that doesn't mean there are no legitimate criticisms of the bill, because like I told you guys yesterday, I think that one of the legitimate criticisms of the bill is not them cutting back on the entitlement system, right, for illegals and for people who shouldn't be on the system in the first place, taking advantage of the system. I think one of the criticisms is that they're not going far enough when it comes to the cuts, right? They're not cutting as much as they should be cutting. Right now, our deficit to GDP ratio is over 6%, okay? In 2019, before the pandemic, it was slightly over 4%. I personally think that we should be trying to get back to that. However, the reality of politics is that because we have democracy in this country, right? Because people vote, again, taking away people's government assistance is not a popular idea, right? Or significantly cutting the military is not a popular idea either, right? So it's really hard to make real cuts. And this is why you don't see politicians ever make real cuts, okay? And the biggest, I think, driver of whether or not this bill is going to be a success is whether or not the growth that comes from this bill is going to lead to inflation, right? That is, I think, what people need to pay attention to the most, okay? I personally believe that because it is mainly supply side stimulus, that we are not going to see that much inflation from the bill, okay, if it does not drive up spending too much, okay, if the deficit doesn't increase too much. And I think that is what the administration is banking on. They're banking on this bill outgrowing whatever it contributes to spending, and hopefully we make up for it with tax revenue from the growth, right? That is what they are banking on. And because, again, this is mainly supply side stimulus, which means that it's going to lead to more production, hopefully that keeps inflation in check, despite the fact that, again, it's not cutting as much spending as I would like to see. So without further ado, let's listen to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent make his pitch for the big, beautiful bill and the benefits.
Got it. You have said that this isn't a drag on the deficit, despite the fact that CBO has scored it pretty aggressively, that it will add $1 trillion to our public debt. You've told me before, and you've told everyone, that you're a fiscal hawk. So how do you square that? That's a key question, I think, that they're asking on Wall Street.
Yeah, well, I square it with I don't believe in the CBO forecast. So, Sarah, let's just look at common sense and logic that if the bill, for some reason, hadn't passed, we would have had the biggest tax hike in history, and the CBO would say we're going to grow at 1.8%. We're going to make expensing and the force structures and equipment permanent, and we are going to have the biggest tax cut in history. And the CBO is still saying we'll only grow at 1.8%. So if you turn up the growth projections to something like 2.8, 3%, which was achieved during President Trump's first term, then the debt disappears. The other thing, too, is are we growing the GDP faster than we're growing the debt, which I am sure we will happen over the remainder of the president's term.
We've been talking to economists about the GDP, because I know that's what you're saying, is that they're underplaying how much this could add to economic growth, and therefore that'll help with the debt picture. We've been asking economists about it. Hard to see a 3% number on most Wall Street forecasts right now. How do you get there? Because I get deregulation is going to help, and I get there's some stimulus here, and the clarity will be helpful. But then there's also tariffs, which could hurt.
Then let's think about this. You can't have it both ways. If tariffs are going to hurt the economy, then we're going to pick up, according to CBO, if you want to take CBO scoring over the 10-year window, we pick up $2.8 trillion in revenue. And what we've seen so far is that tariffs haven't hurt. The dog that didn't bark was that tariffs going to hurt the economy, we're going to hurt the market. Market had the fastest recovery ever, from the low in April, from a 15% decline, and we're at new highs in the market. So I've made my career on listening to the market, not Wall Street economists, so I'm going to stick with what the market's telling me.
Mr. Secretary, it's great to be with you today. And as you're saying, the market's at all-time highs, and perhaps even more insightfully, the bond market's very, very calm as we sit here now. Does that not even indicate to you that you could push the deficit more if you wanted to? I mean, America's probably the only country in the world that could be talking about a 5 or 6 or 7%, even if it's only in the short-term deficit, and see bond markets as calm as they are.
Well, unlike the previous administration, we don't see the need to do that because we think that we can get private sector growth going. And President Trump's agenda, as I've said many times, is a three-legged stool. So it's trade, it's tax. So we're going to complete the tax today when the House votes, and then the president will sign it tomorrow. And I think the permanence and the stimulus from that, and then an important part is deregulation. That is slower moving, and I think those are going to kick in the third and fourth quarter. So we want to bring down the deficit to GDP. We don't need these huge amounts of government spending to keep the economy going. We want the private sector to do it like it did in President Trump's first term.
So is Elon Musk completely wrong? Have you called him to tell him that he's campaigning on the wrong issue on this bill?
As I've said in the past, I have great respect for Elon on rockets. I will leave that to him. He can leave the finances to me.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the other leg of the stool, which is trade, very much in focus now.
Yeah. So you seen that, you heard that. Okay. What Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is saying, for everybody that's concerned about whether or not this is going to add to the deficit and how much, okay, is that despite CBO scoring their growth estimates, they're underestimating the stimulus that this is going to provide for the private sector, the amount of GDP growth that we're going to get as a result. And because of that, that will take care of the deficit. It will make it deficit neutral. Now, is that really true? Who knows, right? We're going to see. We're going to see if it's true. I'm going to give it a chance. But I think the main thing that people need to pay attention to is how much non-inflationary growth do we get? Because if we get growth, but that growth comes with a lot of inflation, then that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a big problem. However, if we get growth and it is not inflationary growth, or the inflation is minimized from the growth, it's going to be a huge win, okay? And, you know, if people are super concerned about the spending, right, and the potential inflation from the money printer turning back on, then, you know, I would consider gold, consider Bitcoin, right, because those assets are assets that tend to perform well when there's more global liquidity, right? As global liquidity increases, those hard money assets tend to perform well, right? And that would be what I would consider to be a hedge against inflation, a hedge against the money printing. If people are really worried about that, again, at an individual level. But outside of that, we're going to have to wait and see. I think we should give it a chance. Is the bill perfect? No, it's not perfect. But undoubtedly, there are wins for everybody in this bill. And I think that is the main thing here. And we're going to see if the bill does what the administration claims that it's going to do. And if it does, then it will be a win. It will be a major win if the economy is humming, if the economy is booming before the midterms. I think Democrats are going to get wiped out. I think they're going to get completely and totally wiped out if this bill, at least in the short term, turns out to be a success, which, hey, I think it's a good chance that it probably will be, okay? Especially if they start dropping interest rates on top of that, then, yeah, I mean, you are certainly going to see a lot of growth. Again, the question is, are we going to see inflation go along with it? If growth outpaces inflation significantly, okay, and we see minimum inflation, and we get that growth, that real growth that we're looking for, then this is going to be a huge W for the Trump administration, and it's going to be over for Democrats. It's going to be absolutely over for Democrats if this bill turns out to be successful. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.